I don't know. I can't get a read on the team, and I'm sure I'm not being paid to coach, and it's the coach's job to get a read on the team, not the media. So I'm sure he doesn't know from game to game either how his team's going to play.
Yeah, that's kind of half the problem. Is sometimes they look okay, sometimes they just look totally disjointed and somewhat disinterested. And lately, the quality of opposition's been pretty low. So, by comparison, the Oilers have looked okay. I guess when they run into slightly better teams, Toronto tonight, Calgary up ahead in the future, will get a better read. But they have to answer that question in the affirmative very quickly, because if they don't, it's going to be a long last 50 some odd games.
Yeah, I think the issue is the inconsistency. In that Boston, that first period, I thought it was a very good first period against Boston. Even though they gave up a goal, they were played with some urgency. They were coming at Boston. They rolled the lines really well, and you can sense they had some jump in that game. With other games, they just look flat. In Arizona, they just look flat. They look disinterested, and it got to a point where you're going to lose to the 31st place team in the league. There was no urgency in their game, and for whatever reason, they can't put two of those games back to back together, and they don't have that urgency every game. And they should look at themselves and go, well, we have to win most of our games now. We put ourselves in such a huge hole. And I think that's the most frustrating thing, is that they don't seem to play with that urgency. If it's not Connor McDavid doing it, no one else is doing it. And I think that's one thing that the Oilers have the issue right now, is that they have to realize the situation they're in, and they have to do something about it. And sometimes they just don't seem like they do, and that's.
I thought last year they were a cocky team. They started well, even if they had a losing streak in November. They were a fairly cocky team. They played cocky, like, okay, beat us. This year they got in a hole, and there hasn't been any cockiness whatsoever to their team. That won't come until they win, if they ever do win 4, 5, 6 in a row, and then also beat some good teams in there, like a Toronto. Like a Calgary, and then they can say, okay, we got a little bit of the swagger back, and now we can go from there. But until they get that, it's gonna, it is the old proverbial, one step forward, two back, because they just can't gain enough traction to be in a better spot looking for a wild card. On paper, it looks not bad, being about 5 points out or so, but there's so many teams between them and that 5 points. It's difficult.